everybody, Ellen here. Welcome back to a new video. I thought we'd take a look on all of the books I read so far during this year as of June 29th when this is being recorded. I'm sorry if you can hear it. The washing machine in the background. It should be quieting down in a little bit. So far I have read 34 books as of right now, and hopefully it will be a lot more because my Goodreads goal is set on 80, so I'm trying to catch up because I'm currently a few books behind. But yeah, let's start with the books I read from January. And since I don't want this video to be 5 hours long, I'm not going to go into too much detail about these books. So the first book I ended up finishing was A Time of Blood by John Gwynne. This is the second book in the Of Blood and Bone series. John Gwynne has quickly become one of my favorite authors, and it's just adult high fantasy, a lot of really great characters. There's characters that are like the good guys and the bad guys, and you get to read from the bad guy's point of view, which is not something you get to do very often, and that's why I love this book so much. And the second book I ended up finishing was Amari and the Great Game by Baby Elston. This is the second book. This is a middle grade book. It's about having magical powers and going to a magic school, trying to, you know, learn how to use your powers and stuff like that. And I love magic schools, I love kids with magic, and it's just such a quick and fun read, and I'm definitely looking forward to more books in this series, and hopefully there will be more. And then I ended up rereading The Shattered Lens by Brandon Sanderson, which is book 4 in Alcatraz vs. the Evil Librarian series. I was reading this for a vlog because I read the entire series just to be able to finish up this series by reading the last book that came out last year. And this is a middle grade series. People have some strange, weird abilities, and I love it. And there's so much adventure and trying to save the day, and things are very literal in this world, and I love it so much. Now we have Unlocked, which is book 8.5 in the Keeper of Lost Cities series by Shannon Messenger. This is a sort of a collection of well, we have a short story in the end, which is like 200 pages, so it's not that short, but also sort of recaps of the earlier books. We have some more information about the world and magical beings and different plants and stuff like that. We get to know a little bit more background about some of the characters, and mostly just to remind yourself what happened in the previous 8 books before we get into the 9th book. Then I reread The Dark Talent by Brandon Sanderson, which is book 5 in the Alcatraz vs. the Evil Librarian series. I love this one just as much as the first time, and this book made me cry for the second time, which is not something that books usually manage to make me do. So if it makes me cry for the second time, it's a good book. Then I read Tress of the Emerald Sea by Brandon Sanderson. I made an entire vlog just for reading this book, and I mean, it's Brandon Sanderson, it's a standalone, it's a beautiful edition, but also very cool magic system. We have pirates, we have basically a world where, what we should call it, spores or whatnot, if they get liquids on them like blood or water or anything, shit starts to grow, and it's not always in the good way, if you know what I mean. And it's really interesting, very different, and I love it. And then I ended up reading Bastille vs. Evil Librarians by Brandon Sanderson and Jancy Patterson. This is the last book in the Alcatraz vs. Evil Librarian series. I've been waiting for this book for years because it's been a long gap between book 5 and book 6. Unfortunately, I was a little bit disappointed with this one because let's just say that Bastille's voice was a little bit too similar to Alcatraz's voice, and she wasn't as kick-ass. She was more emotional and very different from how you're used to see her, and that definitely disappointed me a lot. So didn't like as much as the previous books, unfortunately. And then I read Tilly and the Book Wanderers by Annie James. This is a book that my friend Jamie has been wanting me to read for a really long time, and I'm glad I finally decided to do it because it's on my self-destruct list of this year. So I mean, had to read it, right? But this one was really cool. It's about book wanderers, and she can like talk to and meet and go into different books and meet literary characters like Alice in Wonderland, Anne of Green Gables, and both of those two are like some of my favorite classics. So I was hooked on this one for sure. Then I read The Vanishing Deep by Astrid Schultz, which was also on my self-destruct list. I've had this book basically since it came out because the premise sounds so cool. So basically we meet Tempe, and she wants to resurrect her sister for 24 hours to figure out how she was involved in their parents' deaths. And shit goes awry, it doesn't really go as planned, and yeah, shit happens. This was a really quick read. I'm really glad I picked it up. It was a little bit insta-lovey, but it was a cool world, and I love the strong sibling relationship that Tempe had with her sister. I read Delilah Green Doesn't Care by Ashley Aaron Blake. I have read a couple of Ashley Aaron Blake books at this point, but this was the first adult romance book I read by her. And this was such a quick read. The main character is a photographer, and she's trying to make a living out of that, and she ends up going home to her small hometown to photograph her sister's wedding, and shit happens, and maybe she falls in love. But yeah, this was really good. And then I read All American Muslim Girl by Nadine Julie Courtney, and this is a YA contemporary. It was a quick read, but I felt like it could have been shortened down a little bit. I don't know, it wasn't, now thinking back to it, it wasn't like too memorable, to be honest. Then I read Leviathan Wakes by S.A. Corey. This is the first book in a series, a sci-fi series that has like 9 books or something. I've been trying to get more into sci-fi lately, but I had a little bit of trouble with this one because it kind of lagged a little bit for me and was very insta-lovey in a weird way. And I just didn't connect with any of the characters, so I don't know if I should continue with this series or not. I kind of want to, because I want to be immersed in this world and I want to have a sci-fi series to read, but I'm not sure. We'll see. And then I read The Nightingale by Christine Hanna, which is also a book that was on my self-destruct list. At least I'm reading some of them. I love this book so much. We get to follow two different sisters, 2 different point of views during the Second World War, and this is like the women's war, what they were up to while the men were off fighting. And you know, it's about survival and like tricking the enemy and how to, like, you know, make a difference even though you're not at the war front. And it was so good and made me tear up, and I want to read more Kristen Hanna after that. Let's just leave it at that. And then I listened to Reminders of Him by Colleen Hoover. This was an audiobook that I listened to. The main character killed her boyfriend in a car accident. Emphasis on accident, because people think a little bit different on that part. It was insta-lovey. It was a little bit like, I didn't really like the romance that much. I liked the male love interest and the kid DM and the grandparents, and I feel like just everything came a little bit too easy for her in the end, and I didn't really appreciate that. And I read Late to the Party by Kate Quinlan. This was a YA contemporary that I've had on my shelves forever. I read this one for my Color Wheel Decides What I Read for month. Obviously it landed on yellow. And this one is basically about a girl, a main character whose name I can't remember for the life of me. She doesn't want to be known as the one, like, just want to be a homebody, doesn't really want to do anything, doesn't want to experience new things, while her best friends wants to. And she keeps getting into the same arguments over and over with her friends, and they can't really find a way past it, and it feels like a little bit repetitive. And I wish this book would have been about more than just parties and drugs. And then I read Codename Verity by Elizabeth Vane, which was also a book on my self-destruct list. Unfortunately, this is a historical fiction I did not really enjoy. I thought it was boring, and I didn't really care about the characters, and you didn't really get to be a part of the events. You just get told about the events afterwards, and I don't really like that concept. So no for me. And then I listened to Every Summer After by Carly Fortune, and I really enjoyed this. Our main character meets up with some old childhood friends after their mother passes away, and this is sort of a second chance romance, because she was actually dating one of the brothers as a teenager, and we get to follow partially from when they met as kids, when they started to date, and how they broke up and why, and then we get to follow them in the present time when they meet again. And I actually really enjoyed this one. I didn't like the reason as to why they broke up though, because I feel like that definitely pulled down my rating a little bit, but overall very interesting, good book. And then I read Iron Widow by Saranjay Sao, and this is a YA fantasy novel, and it's very different from like other fantasy novels I've read, because this one, the main character wants to avenge her sister's death, because in this world basically all the guys are pilots. Well, the guys with a high like sort of spirit, what do you want to call it, become pilots, and they ride in these big ships to fight off the enemy. And then you have to have the girls who are not as spiritual, I guess, and they have to ride with them, and the male pilot ends up killing the female pilot because they're much stronger. But then our main character ends up being called the Iron Widow because she actually ended up killing the pilot she was flying with. This was a really interesting plot. I liked the premise of it, and it was very cool. I did not love the sort of love square, triangle, whatever you want to call it. I didn't really like any of the relationships, to be honest. I can't tell you why without spoiling, but I just didn't like it. So I liked the book overall, but just not that element of it. And then I read A Place Called Perfect by Helena Duggan, and I've had this book on my shelf for a while, and I'm really glad to say that I really enjoyed it. So basically we meet Violet, and she ends up moving to this new town called Perfect with her parents, because her dad got a job there to try to fix the problem of everyone going blind, because he knows that shit. But then one day Violet's father ends up disappearing, her mother's acting weird, and she's trying to figure out what the hell's going on in this town basically. So it was a very quick read, very entertaining, very whimsical in a way, and at the same time very suspenseful. So I really enjoyed this one. I read Blood for Blood by Ryan Grodin, and this is the sequel to Wolf by Wolf. This is what happened after the race in the first book. I did really enjoy this one. I did prefer the first one though, because there's a lot of like travel in this one, and you guys know I have a little bit of an issue with that most of the time. But there was some eventful moments, and those were entertaining. And I also ended up reading Iron to Iron by Ryan Grodin, which is a novella that's very short, that basically has the same premise as the first book in the series. Just we get to follow the events from Luca's point of view, and basically it's the exact same thing, so didn't really feel like I needed to read that. I read Beyond the Wand by Tom Felton. This is his autobiography. We get to follow him growing up, how he got into the acting business, how he ended up landing the Harry Potter gig, and everything after that. And I just really liked his like author voice, and it was a really quick read, which is not something I usually say about biographies, no matter if I'm interested in reading about the person or not. But this was a really quick read. It was really interesting. I loved seeing all of the pictures and finding out a little bit more about what he's been up to later on in life. And then I read The Love Hypothesis by Ali Hazelwood. This is a romance novel where the main character ends up fake dating her professor. Technically not her professor, because he's in a different department, but she does that so that her friend will want to date her ex-boyfriend because she knows they have feelings for each other. It was a little bit too long for my taste. I feel like it could have been shortened down. It was a little bit cringe at sometimes, a little bit more too much science talk and whatnot, but it definitely had some really good and interesting parts as well. And then I read Clara and the Sign by Kazuo Ishiguro, which I borrowed from my library and just decided to pick up because it sounded interesting with Clara being an IA and how she like her views on the humanity and stuff like that. And she was in a store for the first like 70 pages, and at that point I got bored, and then I didn't really care about any of the characters, and Clara was kind of a snooze fest. She had no personality, which is, well, I mean, she's an IA, so maybe that was why she had no personality, but it just got boring, so didn't really like it. And then I read Tilly and the Lost Fairy Tales, which is the second book in the Pages and Co series. This is a book that Jamie chose for me to read, which is I'm really grateful for, because that meant that I ended up continuing on with this series while I still had the first book somewhat fresh in mind. And this book was so good. She book wanders, of course, like in the first book. She also gets her friend Oscar into trouble all the time. Tilly is very naive, but Oscar has usually his head on screwed on tight, but he also always listens to what she says anyways, which is not the best combo, I'd say. But yeah, very quick read, fun to see more of the fairy tales come to life, and a lot of drama going on, and it was such a quick read, and I really want to read the third book. I read The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath, which is supposed to be a little bit based on herself. This was really dark and depressing, and mostly focused on her depression and suicide attempt, and other people's depressions and suicide attempts. So it got very dark very fast, and it's such a quick short book, but I definitely struggled to get through it. And then I read Spy Family Volume 1. This is a new manga, and I'm happy to say that I really do want to continue on with this. So basically we get to follow our main character, who is a spy, and for his new mission he has to acquire a wife and a child. What he doesn't know though is that the child and the wife he ends up getting is that the wife is an assassin and the kid is a telepath. So it leads to all kinds of weird ass trouble, and it's very entertaining, very kick-ass, and lots of fun. And then I read Amal Unbound by Aisha Saeed. This is a middle grade book, and it's so short, and I read this all in one day, which is always awesome. Basically, Amal makes the bad decision to get in a quarrel with the son of the sort of guy that owns everything in their town, basically, and she ends up getting in trouble because of that, and she has to go to his estate and work as a servant for his mother to pay off her family's debt, and shit goes awry. I felt like it was really quick read. I really liked the characters, but I felt like the ending was like wrapped up a little bit too quickly in the last 20 pages, so that's my critique of it. And then I read Hurricane Child by Case and Calendar, and basically main character Caroline, she wants to find her mother who disappeared a year and a half ago. She ends up meeting a new friend, Kalinda, who moved to the island, and I feel like it built up to so much more, but nothing really happened, and I got bored and didn't really care about the characters, unfortunately. I read The Promised Neverland Volume 5 by Kazuo Ishiguro, and I love this manga so much. I ended up finding these volumes in the library, and they have like, I think, almost all of them, so I'm happy to go there because it's so hard to buy these volumes and stuff. So I really enjoy this one. So basically we follow a group of orphans, and they're living their day-to-day life thinking that one day they will get adopted, but it turns out that this house and this place and the character that they call Mother is a little bit more darker and sinister than they originally thought, and you know, shit happens. And I really love this volume. It was so action-packed. I also read Death Note Volume 6. This is the black edition, so it's a bind-up of Volume 11 and 12, and I have to say Volume 11 disappointed me a little bit. This series about Light Yagami, he ends up finding this death note lying on the ground, and he finds out that if you write someone's name in this death note, that person will end up dying, and if you write a time and place and how the person will die, that person will die in that exact same way. But in the beginning he kills off criminals, like murderers and stuff, and then after a while he realizes maybe the world isn't as black and white as he originally thought. It's more of a gray area. Who's the bad guy, really? But Volume 11 definitely disappointed me a little bit. felt like two of the characters was just trying to outsmart each other, and there was just this sort of constant banter back and forth, and not in the good banter kind of way, and nothing much really happened, so that bored me a little bit. And then volume 12 was a little bit more action, a little bit more oomph happening, but at the same time was a little bit predictable. Then I read The Promised Neverland volume 6, and I read volume 5, I might as well read volume 6, right? So this one was misprinted, so some pages were missing, some pages came twice, and some at one point it kind of jumped over a lot of pages, so it was a little bit confusing, but the story itself was really good. Definitely slowed down with the action from volume 5. It was not as action packed. We meet some new characters that we're trying to figure out if we can trust them or not. There were some stuff going on, mysteries happening. Definitely ended with a little bit of a teeny tiny cliffhanger, so I want to know what's going to happen in volume 7. And we have Beneath the Sugar Sky by Shelley McGuire. This is the third book in the Wayward Children series. This is a really short book, so I read this like at 4 AM because I couldn't sleep, and then I finished it in just a few hours. Basically, we meet this character named Cora. She was in this sort of mermaid world, but she ends up having to help her friends help their friend because shit has gone awry with her mother. That's all I'm gonna say because I don't want to spoil anything. We end up going to different worlds, one of them being sort of a candy confection kind of world, and I also thought that that would be really cool to live in that kind of world, but as I was reading it, I kind of felt like I'm getting holes in my teeth just reading from how this is described, and I feel like I needed to brush my teeth afterwards, which is a weird feeling, but that honestly is how I felt. But yeah. And then the very last book I've read so far is My Imaginary Mary by Cynthia Hand, Brody Ashton, and Jodie Meadows. This is about Mary Shelley and Ada Lovelace, and they end up meeting, they become friends. Mary Shelley, you know, the author who wrote Frankenstein, and Ada Lovelace, who is very involved in mathematics, science, and basically they have to work together to get rid of the misogynistic bastards that try to take credit for everything. And this is such a quick read. It was like almost 500 pages. I flew through this book so quickly, loved every moment of it. It was awesome. But yeah, those were all of the 34 books I finished so far. I feel like I've barely read anything this year, but hopefully we'll pick up towards the end of the year. I'm definitely in a sort of reading sprint kind of mode at the moment because I'm reading a shit ton, so that feels great. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this sort of wrap up of my reading year so far, and I hope you guys have a good day or night, and I hope we see each other in the next one. Bye.